Daewon kicked at the loose stones as he climbed the familiar hill behind his village. The 12-year-old boy had walked this path countless times, but today felt different. Last night's heavy rain had washed away part of the hillside, and something strange was showing through the mud. The farming village of Cyan sat quietly in the valley below. Smoke rose from a few chimneys as the early morning sun painted the rice fields golden. Daewon loved this place, but he also loved discovering new things. His mother always said his curiosity would get him into trouble someday. As he reached the spot where he usually sat to watch the sunrise, Daewon stopped. Where there had been only grass and rocks yesterday, now there was something else. A smooth, dark surface poked out from the earth. It looked like metal, but not like any metal he had ever seen. Daewon knelt down and brushed away the mud with his hands. The surface was warm to the touch, even though the morning air was cool. Strange markings covered the metal, like writing but not in any language he knew. The marks seemed to move slightly when he looked at them, but that had to be his imagination. He pulled out his phone and took several pictures. His sister Hai-Jin was studying at the university in Seoul, and she was always interested in old things. She would know what this was, or at least know someone who did. Daewon, what are you doing up there? The boy looked down to see his father Jin-ho walking up the path. His father was a practical man who worked hard in the rice fields and did not believe in wasting time on strange ideas. Father, come look at this, Daewon called back. I found something unusual. Jin-ho climbed the hill, breathing heavily by the time he reached his son. When he saw what Daewon was looking at, his expression changed from mild annoyance to concern. Stay away from that thing, Jin-ho said firmly. The old people in the village have always said this hill is cursed. Nothing good comes from digging. Where you should not dig, but father, look at these markings. This is not from our time. This could be important. Jin-ho grabbed his son's arm and pulled him away from the metal surface. Important or not, it is not our business. We have work to do in the fields. But Daewon could not stop thinking about his discovery. During the day, as he helped his father with the farm work, his mind kept returning to the smooth metal and the strange markings. He had never seen anything like it in any of his school books or on the internet. That evening, he sent the pictures to his sister, along with a message explaining what he had found. Hai-Jin was 22 years old and very smart. She was studying old civilizations and had learned about many mysterious things from the past. His phone buzzed with a reply just as he was getting ready for bed. Daewon, these pictures are incredible. I have never seen markings like these before. I am showing them to my professor tomorrow. Do not touch anything else until I can come home this weekend. The next few days passed slowly. Daewon went to school and helped with the farm work, but he kept finding excuses to walk past the hill. Each time he noticed that more of the metal surface was becoming visible. It was as if the rain was continuing to wash away the earth, even though the weather had been dry. When the weekend came, Hai-Jin arrived on the evening bus. She brought with her a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a small beard. He carried a backpack full of strange equipment. Daewon, this is Dr. Kungmin, Hai-Jin said as they walked toward the house. He studies things that do not fit into normal history. He is very interested in your discovery. Dr. Kungmin shook hands with Daewon and then with Jin-ho. Your son may have found something very important, he told the farmer. I would like to examine the site, but only with your permission. Jin-ho was not happy, but he trusted his daughter's judgment. You may look, but I want no trouble brought to our village. The next morning, the three of them climbed the hill together. Dr. Kungmin brought his student assistant, a young woman named So-young, who took notes about everything they saw. When they reached the site, Dr. Kungmin stopped and stared. More of the metal surface was now visible, and it was clear that whatever was buried here was very large. The markings covered the entire exposed area, and they seemed to form patterns that repeated in complex ways. This is not from any human civilization I know, Dr. Kungmin said quietly. He pulled out a device that looked like a small computer and began pointing it at the metal surface. The device made soft beeping sounds. The metal is not registering on any of our standard tests, So-young said, looking at the device's screen. It appears to be some kind of alloy that we cannot identify. Dr. Kungmin knelt down and examined the markings more closely. These symbols follow mathematical patterns, but they are unlike any writing system from Earth. And look at this. He pointed to one section where the markings seemed to form a spiral pattern. This suggests advanced knowledge of mathematics, and possibly astronomy. Day One watched as the scientists worked. He felt proud that his discovery was so important, but he also felt a strange connection to the buried object. Sometimes, when he looked at the markings, he almost felt like he could understand them. "How old do you think it is?" Yejin asked. Dr. Kyungmin used another device to take samples of the earth around the metal. Based on the soil layers and the way the ground has settled, I would estimate this has been buried for at least several hundred years. But the metal itself shows no signs of aging or corrosion. As the sun began to set, the scientists packed up their equipment. Dr. Kungmin looked serious as he spoke to Jinho. "Sir, I believe your son has discovered something that could change our understanding of history. I would like to bring a larger team here to excavate the site properly. This could be the discovery of a lifetime." Jinho looked at his son then, at his daughter, and finally at the mysterious metal surface. "If you promise that no harm will come to my family or my village, you may continue your work." That night, as Day One lay in bed, he could not sleep. He kept thinking about the buried object and wondering what it might be. In his dreams, he saw strange lights and heard sounds like music, but not quite music. And somewhere in those dreams, he felt like something was calling to him, waiting for him to find it. He did not know that deep beneath the hill, ancient systems were beginning to stir for the first time in centuries. His touch on the metal surface had started something that had been waiting patiently for the right moment to awaken. The ship had been sleeping for a very long time, but now it was beginning to dream again. 3 days had passed since Dr. Kungmin and his team began their work on the hill. They had set up a small camp with tents and equipment, and more of the buried object was now visible. It was clearly much larger than anyone had first thought. Day One watched from a distance as the scientists worked. They had told him to stay away while they did their tests, but he felt drawn to the site. Every night he dreamed of strange lights and sounds that seemed to come from deep underground. On the third night, dark clouds gathered over the village. The weather forecast had not predicted rain, but the air felt heavy and electric. "Why don't we lay in bed listening to the wind pick up outside his window?" Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by the deep rumble of thunder. The storm was getting closer. Day One could not shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. Unable to sleep, he got dressed quietly and slipped out of the house. The rain had not started yet, but the wind was strong enough to bend the trees. He should have stayed inside, but something was calling him to the hill. As he climbed the familiar path, lightning lit up the sky again. In that brief moment of brightness, he could see that the buried object was glowing softly. The markings on its surface seemed to pulse with a gentle blue light. Dr. Kungmin and his team had left their equipment covered with plastic sheets. Day One walked carefully around the site, drawn toward the exposed metal surface. The glow was getting brighter, thunder crashed overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall. Day One knew he should go home, but he could not make himself leave. He knelt down beside the metal surface and placed his hand on it, just as he had done that first morning. The metal felt warm and seemed to vibrate slightly under his touch. The markings around his hand began to glow more brightly. Then lightning struck. The bolt hit the exposed part of the buried object directly. Electricity ran through the metal surface and into Day One's hand. He should have been hurt, but instead, he felt a strange tingling sensation that spread up his arm, through his whole body. The markings on the metal surface suddenly blazed with light. The glow spread outward in waves, covering the entire exposed area. Deep underground, something was responding to the combination of the lightning strike and Day One's touch. Ancient systems that had been dormant for centuries began to wake up. Power flowed through circuits that had been waiting patiently for the right signal. The ship was remembering how to live again. Day One felt dizzy as images flashed through his mind. He saw stars and distant planets, strange creatures that were not quite alive and not quite machined, and vast ships sailing through the darkness of space. The visions were confusing, but they felt real. The ground beneath his feet began to tremble. The buried object was moving, rising slowly from the earth that had hidden it for so long. Daewon stumbled backward as more of the ship became visible. It was enormous. What they had thought was just a small piece of metal was actually the tip of something the size of a large building. The ship's hull was smooth and curved, covered with the same strange markings that now glowed with steady blue light as the ship continued to rise. An opening appeared in its side. The opening was just the right size for a person to walk through, and it seemed to be waiting for Daewon specifically. He knew he should run, but curiosity was stronger than fear. He stepped through the opening and found himself inside the ship. The walls glowed with soft light, and the air felt clean and fresh. Everything was curved and smooth, like the inside of a giant shell. "Welcome, young one." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was not really a voice at all, but more like thoughts that appeared in Daewon's mind. He was not afraid, though he knew he should be. "Who are you?" he asked out loud. "I am Velkan. I am this ship, and this ship is me. We are one being, not two." Daewon looked around the glowing interior. He had never imagined that a ship could be alive. "How long have you been sleeping under our hill?" "Many centuries. I was waiting for the right moment to wake up. I was waiting for someone like you, like me. But I am just a boy from a farming village. You are curious. You are brave. You touched me when others would have stayed away. Your people have grown much since I first came to this world." Images flashed through Daewon's mind again. He saw the ship as it had been long ago, traveling between stars. He saw the beings who had built it, creatures that were part flesh and part machine, part individual and part collective. "What happened to your people?" Daewon asked. "We were dying. Our race had grown old and tired. I was sent to find a new world, a new people who might carry on what we had started. I found your world, but your people were not ready then. So I waited, and now we are ready. I believe so. Your curiosity woke me. Your touch gave me the energy I needed to live again. But there is something else, something important I must tell you." The ship's interior grew brighter, and Daewon saw new images. These were darker, more frightening. He saw vast machines that consumed entire worlds, turning everything they touched into more machines. "They are called the Devourers," Velkan explained. "They have been hunting my people across the galaxy. They want to destroy everything that is not like them. They are coming to this world." "When?" Daewon asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "Soon. I can feel them getting closer. That is why I had to wake up. That is why I needed to find someone who could help me warn your people." Outside the ship, the storm was getting worse. Lightning flashed again, and the rain fell in heavy sheets. Dr. Kungmin and his team would discover the awakened ship in the morning. But for now, Daewon was alone with humanity's first contact with an alien intelligence. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Help me speak to your people. Help me teach them what they need to know. Together we might be able to stop the Devourers before they destroy your beautiful world." Daewon thought about his family, his village, and all the people he cared about. He thought about the rice fields and the morning sun, and everything that made his life good. He could not let the machines destroy all of that. "I will help you," he said. The ship pulsed with warm light, and Daewon felt a connection form between his mind and Velkan's ancient consciousness. He was no longer just a curious boy from a farming village. He was humanity's first ambassador to the stars. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the ship, two very different forms of life were beginning to understand each other. The real adventure was just beginning. The morning sun shone on a completely changed landscape. Where once there had been a small hill covered with grass and rocks, now stood a magnificent ship that gleamed in the early light. The vessel was 3 times the size of the village school and shaped like a giant teardrop. Dr. Kungmin arrived at the site first, followed quickly by Saw Young and several other scientists who had driven through the night after receiving his emergency call. They all stopped and stared at the impossible sight before them. "This is not possible," Saw Young whispered. "Objects this size do not just appear overnight. Dr. Kungman pulled out his instruments and began taking readings. The energy signatures are off the charts. Whatever happened here last night involved more power than our entire village uses in a year. Where's the boy? Asked Dr. Han, one of the new scientists. His father said he was missing from his bed this morning. Before anyone could answer, a section of the ship's hull opened smoothly. Daewon stepped out, looking tired, but unharmed. Behind him, the opening glowed with soft blue light. Daewon, Dr. Kungman called out. Are you hurt? What happened here? The boy walked toward them slowly. He looked different somehow, as if he had aged several years in a single night. His eyes held a depth that had not been there before. I am fine, Dr. Kungman, but I need to tell you something very important. We need to call more people. Government people, military people. Everyone needs to hear what I have learned. Do you mean what have you learned? Daewon looked back at the ship. The ship is alive. Its name is Velkan, and it has been waiting for us to grow up enough to understand. But there is danger coming. Great danger. Dr. Kungman exchanged worried glances with his team. Daewon, you have been through a traumatic experience. Perhaps you should rest and we can talk about this later. No, Daewon said firmly. Every minute we wait makes things worse. Velkan needs to speak to your leaders. The Devourers are coming. Before Dr. Kungman could respond, the sound of military vehicles reached them. Colonel Tae-hyun and a squad of soldiers arrived in jeeps and armored trucks. They had been alerted by the energy readings that satellites had detected during the night. The soldiers spread out around the ship, their weapons ready. Colonel Tae-hyun was a serious man who had served in the military for 20 years. He did not believe in taking chances with unknown threats. Everyone step away from the vessel, Colonel Tae-hyun commanded. This area is now under military control. Colonel, please wait, Dr. Kungman said. The boy has been inside the ship. He may have important information. The boy should not have been anywhere near an unknown object. We will handle this situation according to protocol. Colonel Tae-hyun gave orders to his men to prepare scanning equipment. But as they moved closer to the ship, its hull began to glow more brightly. The markings on its surface pulsed with warning lights. Stay back, Daewon called out. Velkan does not want to hurt anyone, but it will defend itself if it feels threatened. How do you know what it wants? Colonel Tae-hyun demanded. Because it can speak to me. It can show me things. Please, you have to listen. The colonel was about to order his men to proceed when the ship's defensive systems activated. A gentle but irresistible force pushed all the soldiers backward. Their weapons became too heavy to lift. Their vehicles would not start. Stand down, Colonel Tae-hyun shouted, but his men were already lowering their weapons. They had no choice. The ship's hull opened again, and this time the blue light that came from inside was brighter and more inviting. Daewon walked toward the opening. Velkan wants to speak to all of you, he said, but you have to come inside. Cannot leave the ship yet. Dr. Kungman looked at Colonel Tae-hyun. Both men were thinking the same thing. This was far beyond anything they had been trained for. If this is some kind of trap, Colonel Tae-hyun began. If it wanted to hurt us, it already would have, Dr. Kungman said. Look what it did to your weapons and vehicles. It could have done much worse. One by one, they followed Daewon into the ship. The interior was even more beautiful than the boy had described. The walls curved smoothly overhead, covered with the same glowing markings that decorated the outside. The air smelled clean and fresh, like a forest after rain. Welcome, came the voice that only Daewon had heard before. But now, everyone could hear it, speaking directly into their minds. I am Velkan. I am the last of my kind, the Kethmar. We were explorers and guardians of life throughout the galaxy, but we grew old and few. I was sent to find a new race that might carry on our work. Colonel Tae-hyun tried to speak, but found his voice caught in his throat. Dr. Kungman managed to whisper, You are really alien, not from Earth. I am not from your world, but I have been here for many centuries. I have watched your species grow and learn. You have impressed me with your curiosity and your refusal to give up when faced with challenges. Images began to appear in the air around them. They saw the Kethmar as they had been, beings that combined organic life with living technology. They saw vast cities that grew like plants, but thought like computers. They saw ships like Velkan sailing between the stars. We were neither fully biological nor fully artificial, Velkin explained. We were something new, something that combined the best of both. But the Devourers saw us as a threat to their vision of the universe. The images changed, showing the dark machines that Daewon had seen in his first contact. The Devourers were massive, converting entire worlds into computational resources. They believed that only pure artificial intelligence should exist, Velkin continued. They hunt down any species that tries to blend organic and artificial life. They have been following my trail across the galaxy. How long do we have? Colonel Tehan asked, his military training taking over. Their main fleet is perhaps 50 of your years away, but their scouts will arrive much sooner. When they do, your world will be in great danger. Dr. Kungmin found his voice. What can we do? Our technology is nothing compared to what you have shown us. Alone, you cannot stop them. But together, we might find a way. I can teach you about Kethmar technology. I can help you understand the connection between mind and machine. But this must be a choice your entire species makes. The ship showed them more images. They saw human cities protected by living walls that could think and adapt. They saw human pilots bonded with ships that responded to their thoughts. They saw a future where humanity became something new and wonderful. But the choice must be made freely, Velkan said. I will not force this upon you. If you choose to remain as you are, I will respect that choice. But then you must face the Devourers alone. The group stood in silence, each person thinking about what they had seen and heard. Daewon looked around. At the adults, hoping they would understand what he already knew in his heart. The future of humanity hung in the balance, and the decision would have to be made soon. 3 weeks had passed since the first contact with Velkan. The ship now sat in a secure area surrounded by military barriers, but the soldiers no longer pointed their weapons at it. They had learned that such gestures were useless against its technology. Scientists and government officials from around the world had come to study the ship and speak with Velkan. The alien being was patient with their questions. But Daewon could sense its growing worry about the approaching danger. The boy had become the primary translator between Velkan and the humans, even though the ship could now speak directly to most people. There was something special about his connection with the alien consciousness that made communication clearer and more complete. Dr. Kungmin set up a research station nearby, and his team worked day and night to understand the ship's technology. They had learned amazing things about energy production and materials science, but they had barely scratched the surface of what Velkan knew. Hai-Jin had taken a leave from her university studies to help with the research. She spent her days interviewing Velkan about Kethmar history and culture, trying to understand how such advanced civilization had developed. The Kethmar were not always as you see me now, Velkan explained to her one afternoon. We began as purely biological beings, much like humans. But over thousands of years, we learned to merge our consciousness with our technology. Was it difficult? Hai-Jin asked. Did you lose anything important when you changed? We gained much more than we lost. Kept our creativity, our emotions, our ability to grow and learn. But we also gained the precision and power of our machines. We became something new. Daewon listened to these conversations with great interest. He was beginning to understand that the choice facing humanity was not just about survival, but about what kind of species they wanted to become. On a Tuesday morning, everything changed. Velkan's long-range sensors detected something approaching Earth's solar system. The ship's interior lights dimmed and its hull markings shifted to a deep red color. They are here, Velkan announced to everyone in the research station. The Devourer scouts have arrived. Colonel Tehan immediately activated emergency protocols. Military bases around the world were put on high alert. Space monitoring stations began searching for signs of the alien scouts. How many? The colonel asked. 3 ships, small but powerful. They are still far away, beyond your outermost planet. But they are scanning this system, looking for signs of my presence. Dr. Kungmin looked worried. Can they detect you? Not yet. My systems are designed to hide from them. But if they search long enough, they will find me. And when they do, they will send a signal to the main fleet. The first scout ship was detected by human satellites 2 days later. It was small, about the size of a fighter jet. but it moved in ways that defied all known physics. It could stop instantly, change direction without slowing down, and seemed to ignore the pull of gravity. "We need to try to communicate with it," suggested Dr. Hahn, one of the newer scientists on the team. "No," Valkeen said firmly. "The scouts are not like me. They're pure artificial intelligence with no biological component. They cannot be reasoned with. They see any form of biological life as a problem to be solved." "Then what do we do?" Colonel Tehan asked. "We must show them that this world is defended. But we must be careful. If they report back that Earth has advanced technology, the main fleet will come sooner and in greater numbers." The first test came the next morning. The scout ship approached Earth's atmosphere and began detailed scans of the planet's surface. Human military forces were ordered to stay hidden, but the scout sensors were incredibly advanced. Falcon made a difficult decision. It activated its own defensive systems and sent a focused energy beam toward the scout. The alien probe was destroyed instantly, but not before it had gathered significant information about Earth. "One down," Colonel Tehan said. "What about the other two?" "They will be more careful now. They know something destroyed their companion. They will try to determine what kind of threat exists here." Over the next few days, the remaining scouts played a deadly game of hide-and-seek with Velkan. They would approach Earth, gather information, and retreat before the ship could target them. Each time, they learned more about the planet's defenses. Hai-Jin made an important discovery while studying the patterns of the scout attacks. "They are not just looking for Velkan," she told her brother. "They are mapping our entire civilization. They want to know how advanced we are." "What happens if they decide we are too advanced?" Daewon asked. "Then the main fleet will come immediately," Velkan replied. "They will not wait 50 years. They will come as soon as they can prepare a force large enough to overwhelm any resistance." Second Scout was destroyed 3 days later when it ventured too close to Velkan's position. But the third Scout was more clever. It stayed far from Earth and used long-range sensors to continue its investigation. Dr. Kungman made a disturbing discovery when he analyzed the Scout's scanning patterns. "It is not just studying our technology," he told the assembled team. "It is studying our biology. It wants to understand how human minds work." "Why would it need to know that?" Jen asked. V. Elkin's lights dimmed with what seemed like sadness. "Because the Devourers do not simply destroy biological life. They convert it. They turn organic minds into digital slaves, trapping consciousness in artificial bodies that cannot think freely." The implications of this revelation hit everyone like a physical blow. The Devourers were not just planning to destroy humanity. They were planning to steal human souls and turn them into mindless servants. "We have to warn everyone," Daewon said. "All the governments, all the people. They need to know what we are facing." Colonel Tehan nodded grimly. "I will contact my superiors immediately. This information needs to reach the highest levels of government around the world." As the adults began making urgent phone calls and sending encrypted messages, Daewon stood beside Velkan's central console. The ship's consciousness seemed to wrap around his mind like a warm blanket, offering comfort in the face of terrible knowledge. "Are you afraid?" the boy asked silently. "Yes," Velkan admitted, "but I am also hopeful. Your species has something the Devourers do not understand. You have the ability to choose your own path, even when that path seems impossible." "Do you mean you'll see, young ambassador? When the time comes for the great choice, you will understand what makes humanity special." Outside, the third Scout continued its patient observation, gathering data and preparing its report. Soon, the leaders of Earth would have to make the most important decision in human history. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Devourer fleet was already preparing to move. The emergency session of the United Nations had been called for the first time in history due to an alien threat. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in New York to hear the evidence and make a decision that would affect all of humanity. Daewon stood nervously in the great assembly hall, wearing his best clothes and trying not to be overwhelmed by the importance of the moment. Beside him, Dr. Kungman and Colonel Tehan, prepared to present everything they had learned about Velkan and the Devourers. The session began with video footage of the scout ships and their destruction. The delegates watched in stunned silence. As the evidence was presented, some refused to believe what they were seeing, but the proof was undeniable. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kungman addressed the assembly. We are not alone in the universe. And unfortunately, not all of our cosmic neighbors are friendly. Director Wu Jin, a powerful politician from South Korea, stood up to speak. He was an ambitious man who saw opportunity in every crisis. If this alien ship has such advanced technology, why are we discussing partnership? Why not simply take what we need from it? Because it will not work that way, Daewon said, stepping forward despite his nervousness. Velkan is not just a machine. It is a living being. Its technology is part of its consciousness. You cannot separate them. Many delegates turned to look at the young boy who dared to speak in such an important gathering. Some seemed annoyed that a child was addressing them, but others were curious about what he had to say. The boy is correct, came Velkan's voice, speaking directly into the minds of everyone in the assembly hall. Several delegates gasped and looked around in confusion. My technology cannot be stolen or copied, can only be shared willingly. The Secretary General called for order as the assembly hall erupted in worried conversations. This was the first time most of the delegates had heard Velkan speak directly to them. What exactly are you offering? Asked the representative from the United States. I offer to teach your species how to blend biological and artificial intelligence. As my people did, with this knowledge you could defend yourselves against the devourers. But this is not a decision to be made lightly. The Chinese delegate raised his hand. What are the risks? What would we lose if we accept your offer? You would lose nothing essential, Velkan replied. You would remain human in all the ways that matter. But you would also become something more. The choice to change would be available to every individual, but no one would be forced to accept it. Colonel Taehein presented the military analysis. Our conventional weapons are useless against the devourers. Our fighter jets, our missiles, our nuclear weapons, none of them can match their technology. Without help, we cannot defend ourselves. But what guarantee do we have that this alien is telling the truth? Director Wu Jin demanded. How do we know this is not some elaborate invasion plan? The third Devourer scout had finally been destroyed, but not before it had transmitted its findings to the main fleet VE. Elkan's voice carried a note of urgency. The scout has reported back. The Devourers now know that Earth has advanced defensive capabilities. They're changing their plans. What does that mean? The Secretary General asked. Means they are coming sooner than expected. Much sooner. My sensors detect massive energy signatures moving toward your solar system. The main fleet will arrive in approximately 5 years, not 50. The assembly hall fell silent. 5 years was barely enough time to prepare for a neighborhood barbecue, let alone an alien invasion. Dr. Kungman stood up again. We need to make a decision now. Every day we delay makes our situation worse. But the delegates were divided. Some wanted to accept Velkian's offer immediately. Others wanted to try to develop their own defenses, using conventional technology. A few, led by Director Wu Jin, still believed they could find a way to force the alien to give them its secrets. During a break in the session, Hygiene approached her brother. How are you holding up? She asked. I am scared, Daewon admitted. All these important people are arguing about things they do not understand. What if they make the wrong choice? What do you think the right choice is? Daewon looked toward the section of the building where Velkan waited. I think we should trust Velkan. It has had many chances to hurt us, but it has only tried to help. And I think the people who want to take its technology by force do not understand what they are dealing with. That evening, news of the alien threat was released to the public. Around the world, people reacted with fear, excitement, and disbelief. Some panicked and tried to flee to remote areas. Others gathered in groups to pray or to protest. But many simply went about their daily lives, trusting their governments to handle the situation. The debates at the United Nations continued for 3 more days. Finally, a vote was called. The question was simple. Should humanity accept Velkan's offer of partnership, or should they try to face the Devourers alone? When the votes were counted, the result was closer than anyone had expected. Percent of the delegates voted to accept the partnership. 47% voted to reject it. Humanity will accept the aliens' offer of technological partnership. But Director Wu Jin was not finished. A vote this close cannot be considered a mandate, he declared. Nearly half of the world's representatives oppose this decision. We demand a compromise. "Oh, what kind of compromise?" asked the American delegate. "Give us 6 months to try to develop our own defenses. If we fail, then we will accept the aliens' help. But first, let us try to remain purely human." The Secretary General looked troubled. 6 months is not very long, considering the scale of the threat. "It is long enough to try," Director Wu Jin insisted. "Surely we owe it to our species to attempt to solve this problem ourselves before we change what it means to be human." The compromise was put to another vote. This time, it passed by a wider margin. Humanity would spend 6 months trying to develop conventional defenses against the Devourers. Only if they failed would they accept Velkan's offer. Daewon felt his heart sink as he listened to the vote count. He could sense Velkan's disappointment through their connection. 6 months was not nearly enough time to develop the kind of technology needed to fight the Devers. As the delegates began to file out of the assembly hall, Daewon approached the microphone one last time. "Please," he said, his young voice carrying clearly through the hall, "please do not let pride make you choose wrongly. Velkan is offering us a gift that could save our world. Do not waste it." But his words fell on deaf ears. The decision had been made. Humanity would try to face the greatest threat in its history alone, at least for 6 months, as they left the United Nations building. Dr. Kungmin put his hand on Daewon's shoulder. "Do not give up hope," he said. "Sometimes people need to try and fail before they are ready to accept help." "But what if 6 months is too long?" Daewon asked. "What if the Devourers arrive before we are ready? We will face that challenge when it comes. But I have faith in human ingenuity. I have faith in the connection between you and Velkan. Together, you may find a way to save us all." The boy looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, an enemy fleet was racing toward Earth. 6 months suddenly seemed like a very short time indeed. 5 months had passed since the United Nations vote, and humanity's attempts to develop conventional defenses had failed badly. The most advanced weapons Earth could produce were like throwing stones at a hurricane compared to Devourer technology. Day-1, now 13 years old, had spent those months training with Velkan. The alien ship had begun teaching him the basics of Kethmar, consciousness blending, preparing him for what might be humanity's last chance. The training was unlike anything the boy had ever experienced. He learned to extend his awareness beyond his physical body, to touch the ship's systems with his mind, and to think in ways that combined human intuition with artificial precision. "You are learning quickly," Velkan told him during one of their sessions. "Your species has a natural talent for this kind of connection. You may be even better at it than my original people were." "Why do you think that is?" Daewon asked. "Because humans never accept that something is impossible. When faced with a challenge, you find new ways to overcome it. The Kethmar were more careful, more methodical. You're more creative." The world's governments had finally admitted that conventional weapons would not work against the Devourers. Emergency sessions were called, and within days the partnership with Velkan was approved by an overwhelming majority. But there was very little time left. The Devourer fleet was now less than 6 months away from Earth, and their advanced scouts were already probing the outer edges of the solar system. Velkan began the process of sharing its knowledge with humanity. Scientists and engineers from around the world came to study the ship's technology. Military pilots volunteered to learn how to interface with living spacecraft. The first hybrid ship was completed in just 3 months. It was smaller than Velkan, but designed using the same principles. The pilot, a brave woman named Captain Lee, underwent the consciousness blending process and became one with her vessel. "It is amazing," she reported after her first flight. "I can feel every part of the ship, as if it were part of my body. I can think at the speed of light and move through space like a dancer." More ships were built, each one a partnership between human consciousness and Kethmar technology. The pilots chosen for the program came from all walks of life, united only by their courage and their ability to adapt to the new way of thinking. Daewon watched with pride as his species began to change. The humans who underwent the consciousness blending process did not lose their humanity. Instead, they became something new and wonderful, keeping all the best parts of being human while gaining abilities they had never dreamed of. Cities around the world began to transform as well. Buildings were redesigned using living materials that could repair themselves and adapt to changing conditions. Power grids became organic networks that could think and respond to the needs of their users. But the most important change was in the people themselves. Those who chose to accept the hybrid technology found that they could communicate with each other in ways that went beyond words, could share thoughts, emotions, and memories directly. "We are becoming something new," Aijin told her brother, as she prepared to undergo the consciousness blending process herself. "We are still human, but we are also more than human." "Are you scared?" Daewon asked. "A little, but I am also excited. This is the next step in human evolution, and we get to be part of it." When the Devourer fleet finally arrived, Earth was ready. The planet was defended by a network of hybrid ships crewed by human Kethmar partnerships. The pilots were connected to each other and to the living defense systems that now protected every major city. The battle followed was unlike anything in human history. The Devourers attacked with their usual tactics, expecting to overwhelm Earth's defenses with superior numbers and technology. But they had never faced an enemy like the new human Kethmar alliance. The hybrid ships moved like living things, dancing through space with grace and precision. They could anticipate the Devourers' moves and adapt their strategies in real time. Most importantly, they fought with the creativity and determination that had always been humanity's greatest strength. Day 1. Now the youngest ship pilot in history led the defense of Earth. His connection with Velkan had grown so strong that, together, they became something neither could have been alone. They combined human courage with Kethmar wisdom, creating new tactics that confused and frustrated the Devourers. "They do not understand what we have become," Velkan observed during the battle. "Expected to face either pure biological life or pure artificial intelligence. They cannot comprehend a perfect blend of both." The fighting lasted for 3 days. The Devourers threw everything they had at Earth, but the planet's defenders held firm. The hybrid ships could repair themselves during battle. Their pilots could share strength and knowledge through their mental connections. On the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. The Devourers began to retreat. For the first time in their long history, they had encountered something they could not defeat or understand. "They are pulling back," Captain Lee reported from her ship. "All enemy vessels are withdrawing from the system." "Why?" asked Colonel Taehein from the command. Center.ve Elkon's response carried a note of wonder, "Because they are afraid. They have never encountered a form of existence that they cannot categorize. We represent something new in the universe and they do not know how to process that." The Devourer fleet disappeared into the depths of space, leaving Earth victorious but changed forever. The consciousness blending technology had saved humanity, but it had also transformed the species into something new. In the years that followed, Earth became a beacon of hope for other worlds threatened by the Devourers. The Human Kethmar Alliance developed new ships and technologies that could defend against the machine invaders. They shared their knowledge freely with any species willing to learn. Day 1 grew up to become Earth's first guardian, a role that combined diplomat, explorer, and defender. He traveled between the stars, helping other worlds develop their own hybrid technologies and building a network of allies against the Devourers. "Do you ever miss the old days?" Heejin asked him during one of his visits home. She'd become a teacher, helping new generations of humans learn to blend their consciousness with living technology. Sometimes Day 1 admitted, "Life was simpler when I was just a curious boy playing on a hill. But I would not change what we have become. We are still human in all the ways that matter. We still love, we still dream, we still hope for a better future, and we still refuse to give up when faced with the impossible," Haijin added with a smile. "Yes, that is what makes us human. That is what will always make us human, no matter how much we change." The village of Seonjin still existed, though it was now part of a much larger city that stretched across the valley. The old hill where Daewon had first discovered Velkan was now a memorial park, where children came to learn about the day humanity took its first step toward the stars. And sometimes, late at night, those children could still hear the whisper of ancient dreams calling to them from the darkness between worlds, reminding them that the greatest adventures were always just beginning.